There is something quite extraordinary that most people never notice about their own minds, and it is this. Between every thought there is a gap, a space, a moment of silence. And in that space, in that gap between thoughts, there exists a peace so profound, so complete, so utterly untouched by the chaos of mental activity, that if you could rest there for even a moment, you would realize that what you have been seeking your entire life has been here all along, closer than your own breath, more intimate than your own heartbeat. But we never notice this space. We are so completely absorbed in the content of our thoughts, so utterly identified with the stream of mental activity, that we miss entirely the silence in which all of this is happening. It is like being so fascinated by the images on a movie screen that you forget there is a screen, forget there is a space in which the images appear, forget that the screen itself remains untouched and unchanged no matter what drama plays out upon it. The thoughts themselves, you see, are not the problem. Thoughts arise naturally. They are part of the functioning of consciousness, part of how we navigate and make sense of the world. The problem is that we have become so completely identified with thinking, so thoroughly convinced that we are our thoughts, that we have lost all awareness of the space in which thinking occurs. And it is this space, this silence, this gap between thoughts, this is where peace lives. Let me describe what I mean more carefully. Pay attention right now to your own mind. Notice how thoughts arise. A thought appears, perhaps a thought about what I am saying, or a thought about something you need to do later, or a memory, or a plan, or a worry. The thought appears, it exists for a moment, and then it passes, and then another thought arises, and another, and the mind seems to be filled with this constant stream of thinking, this endless parade of thoughts marching through consciousness. But now notice something else. Between one thought and the next, there is a gap. It may be very brief, almost imperceptible, but it is there. One thought ends, and before the next thought begins, there is a moment, a tiny sliver of time, in which there is no thought at all. Just silence, just awareness without content, just pure being without any mental activity. This gap is always there. It exists between every single thought you have ever had. But because the gap is so brief, and because we are so habituated to thinking, so addicted to mental activity, we skip right over it. We leap from one thought to the next without ever noticing the silence in between. It is like listening to music and being so focused on the notes that you never hear the silence between the notes. And yet the silence is what gives the music its shape, its rhythm, its meaning. Now, what would happen if you could become aware of this gap? What would happen if, instead of being exclusively focused on the thoughts themselves, you could notice the space between thoughts? What would happen if you could rest, even for a moment, in that silence? I will tell you what would happen. You would discover peace. Not the peace that comes from getting what you want, not the peace that comes from circumstances being favorable, not the peace that depends on anything external at all, but the peace that is your fundamental nature, the peace that has always been here, the peace that exists prior to all thinking, beneath all mental activity, in the very ground of your being. This peace is not something you create, it is not something you achieve, it is not something you have to work toward or earn. It is always already here. It is what you are when you are not thinking. It is the background of silence against which all thoughts appear. It is the space in which the entire drama of your mental life is playing out. But we never notice it because we are so absorbed in the drama. We are so caught up in the content of our thoughts, our worries, our plans, our memories, our judgments, our endless internal commentary that we never step back far enough to notice the silence in which all of this is occurring. We are like fish who have never noticed water because they have never been outside of it. Now, the reason this matters, the reason this is not just an interesting philosophical observation, but something of immense practical importance, is that all of your suffering, all of your anxiety, all of your stress and worry and fear, all of it exists in thought. It does not exist in the gaps between thoughts. In that space, in that silence, there is no suffering. There is just awareness, just presence, just peace. Think about it. When you are anxious, what is happening? You are thinking. You are thinking about something that might happen, something you are worried about, some scenario you are imagining. The anxiety exists entirely in the thought. And when you are depressed, you are thinking about the past, about what went wrong, about how things should have been different. The depression exists in the thought. And when you are stressed, you are thinking about all the things you need to do, all the ways you might fail, all the demands upon you. The stress exists in the thought. But in the gap between thoughts, there is no anxiety, there is no depression, there is no stress, there is just this moment, just awareness, just being, and it is completely peaceful. So what we are talking about here is not some esoteric mystical experience. We are talking about something utterly simple and completely accessible. We are talking about noticing what is already here, what has always been here, what could not be here, the space between your thoughts, the silence that holds all sound, the peace that exists prior to all disturbance,